What's up, Internet? You're tuned to episode 156 of the FlipScreen Games Podcast, a weekly video game podcast where two best buds from different nations come together to discuss the wide world of video games. I'm your host, Peter Messi, joined, as always, by my very good friend and co-host, Mr. Steven Radford.
Hello, hello.
It's good to be back, Steve.
Yeah, we missed you, Pete. What have you been up to?
Moving. If you guys are loyal listeners, you'll know that I mentioned a couple weeks ago that Sarah and I bought a house, and it's been great, but also exhausting. And I know a couple people who are like not in the Discord had reached out on Twitter or, you know, a bunch of other places, like asking where we were and what happened. And my computer also broke down the week I was moving. So we lost a week's worth of shows that Max and I recorded because my computer fried them. So it's been a tumultuous couple weeks over here on my side of the pond, but
hey, the thing with you and Max worked out because literally the week after you recorded a whole episode about Concord, they pulled the plug on Concord, so we got a whole other episode and we were able to go back over what you'd already spoken about. So it worked out.
I was pleased because I was like, damn, that was such a good episode. Like, it sucks that we lost it. Like, we did some really good journalism there. I was glad you guys got to retread some of those talking points, and people got to hear the conversation anyway. I'm sorry I missed it, though. But, thank you guys for your understanding and everything, and for everybody's kind words and all the congratulations and all that stuff. I am hoping that the disruption is at a close here. But if you're on YouTube, you'll see that I'm recording on my couch and not in my office. So we're a little bit of a ways.
I quite like the couch setup. It looks comfy.
It's
casual. You know?
I like that it looks casual. I'll tell you, it's a lot less comfortable because I do not have any arch support right now. My old ass back. Man. But you can see Lucas is sitting next to me right here, so that's nice. You know.
You know what? A cat makes everything better. Well, so it doesn't really matter.
You know, you can't see him actually that well because he's laying down, but that's fine. Anyway. We're going to talk about video games now. I've meandered enough. Thank you for letting me talk about my personal life. It's good to be back, everybody. I missed you. So I want to talk about a little question that I've had on my mind this week, Steve. You know, for many a year now, us and many other folks like us have talked about how Xbox Game Pass is the best deal in gaming. And I think, you know, we've talked a lot about, you know, is streaming a major part of the future of video games? You know, are we going to hit a point where, you know, video games go the way of like television and movies and music, and that, you know, nobody owns anything anymore and it's all about streaming and paying for access? And I don't know about you, but I feel like we might be seeing the first chips in the armor of that potential future as Xbox is starting to maybe get a little gun shy about the fact that it doesn't make as much money as it could or that it needs to justify how much they're spending on acquiring studios and investing in new games. Because, of course, there was just a few weeks ago, right, that they announced that they were going to be introducing tiers, that there was going to be a price hike, and we got an update today that this new base tier is not going to include many of the most attractive games that you would want it to include day and date anymore.
Yeah, so I think it's interesting because it was really the best deal in gaming. This was at a time when Xbox Game Pass, the console version, was only $10.99 a month. It didn't include online play. You still had to pay for Xbox Live Gold for that if you wanted
or
it.
DLC.
Or DLC, or you could go up to Game Pass Ultimate, which basically included Xbox Live Gold, and you also got EA Play and some other stuff. But they've since replaced Xbox Game Pass Console and PC Game Pass entirely with Xbox Game Pass Core, which is basically a rebrand of Xbox Live Gold, and Xbox Game Pass Standard, which is now $14.99 a month. But the big news is that only comes with a limited library of Xbox Game Pass games. And we learned this week that they don't include some huge titles. Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3, Starfield, and Diablo 4 are amongst those titles. They won't be on Xbox Game Pass Standard. You'll need to plump up $19.99 a month in order to gain access to those. You're only going to get I think it's 40 games on that are exclusive to Xbox Game Pass Ultimate. So there's like a big list of them over on the Reset Era forums that we can post a link to. But yeah, some huge titles missing. Things like Forza Motorsport as well isn't on there.
Diablo 4.
Yeah, Age of Mythology is not going to be on there.
Which is like, that's, I think, to me, the one that stood out the most, because that game is not this major cash cow, like, not that it's a good thing, but I can understand the mentality of like the most premium games that we have, right? The Starfields, the Call of Duties, those games that are really our bread and butter, that you're going to put those behind the, highest paywall. But Age of Mythology is a remake of a pretty niche game. And granted, it's, a Microsoft Studios game, but like that to me is like, so then is every Microsoft Studios game going to be on this premium tier? And that, if you want to play one of those games day and date, now you got to shell out $20, because that becomes a much less good deal, right? I mean, how many of these games take at least 3 months to finish?
Do you think that's what will end up happening then? That day one, day and date games, they go on the ultimate tier, but then they come eventually to the standard tier to kind of bolster on that lineup, or maybe they ultimately keep some games that are exclusive to that. Like, will Call of Duty ever come to the middle tier? Are all Bethesda games or Activision games only going to be on Ultimate, and the middle tiers just for the Xbox Studios games and the games that have been out for a little while?
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm inclined to think, is that, like, you made the point. I think like new games, right? Like fresh new releases are probably all going to exist at that $20 tier, and you'll have a point where after a certain amount of time on the market where they feel like they've, wrung the maximum value out of them. Not dissimilar from how we've seen that work on the PlayStation side of the fence, right? Where it's like the games are not their day and date, but once they're a year old or 18 months old or something like that, then maybe you bring like the God of War Ragnaroks or Horizon or whatever, right? Like to that service. That's what I'm envisioning, right? It's going to be, if you want to enjoy those games day and date, you're shelling out $20. And then maybe after a certain amount of time, they get dropped down. And then that's a marketing beat as well, right? It gives you an opportunity to be like, oh, now on the base tier, you can play Starfield or whatever.
Do you think they do that around the same time that these games also jump ship across the fence to the PlayStation 5? So it's like, it's on PlayStation 5, but you can also just subscribe to Game Pass and get it if you want to. It's now on that middle tier.
That would make a lot of sense. I could definitely see that. Because, like, this to me does kind of, like, read a little bit like them exploring, monetization models and like, where is there room for them to make more money on a game, and, like, releasing something like, like, when they announced the release date for Indiana Jones, right? Like, we saw it's going to come to PlayStation, because obviously there's a lot of money to be made there. And I would imagine that that's probably the thought process here, is that, like, if we're going to bank on somebody jumping in and playing something like a Starfield or whatever, and either try to get them on the hook so that they spend more than the actual value of it over the course of their subscription, or that if they don't finish it, we at least get $20, we at least get $40 instead of $10. It's like, that reads correct to me. I could easily see, now that the kind of like shiny new toy effect of this game has worn off, maybe it gets a price cut and it's on a sale. It comes to PlayStation. It ends up on this other tier. And, that's how you continue to bolster the, core level of Game Pass over time. Because, like, I would be very surprised if something like, Fallout 4, for example, right, was on that $20 tier, because it's like a 10-year-old game, right? So it's like that will probably stay on the core level, whereas
there's only 25 Xbox games on the core level, and I think this is what's confusing. We've kind of gone to the point where it's like, I'm so confused with the PlayStation Plus tiers, I'm now confused with the Xbox tiers. There's PlayStation Plus Game Pass Core, which is $9.99 a month. You only get 25 games, but you do get online multiplayer and member deals. And then there's Standard, which is $14.99 a month, which has more games, but not all of them. And then there's now Ultimate, which has everything.
So it's exactly the PlayStation model then, of 3 tiers that are not particularly easy to understand from the outside and that require you to do a decent amount of research to figure out if the game you want to play is playable on the tier that you're paying for.
Yeah, you get 370 games on Xbox Game Pass Standard compared to 508 on Game Pass Ultimate. So there is apparently 41 of those games on Microsoft-owned titles, and then the other 96 are part of EA Play.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I think this is a really bad call. And I know that that's like very easy for me to say as a consumer, right? To be like, yes, you're ruining the thing because it's more expensive now. But we've talked a lot about how that's always been kind of the selling point of Game Pass, right? Has been that it is an aggressively good deal, and it was easy to live in that kind of like, that streamer mindset of like set it and forget it. Like, this is just a thing I pay for and I use it when I use it. And when I don't care that they take my $10 because it's worth it for the months that I do
streaming
want.
service is $10 now. Look at the price of Disney Plus. Look at the price of Netflix. Look at the price of Apple TV.
Yeah, but that's my point though, right? Is like, I think that like that is a model that is, like I understand why it's going that way. It's because ultimately streamers, like, they never cost enough, and they had like this loss leader kind of mentality where it's like you corner a market and then you gradually raise the price, right? And it's like we've seen that that's ultimately in the long run ended up working out for like the Netflixes of the world, but I just don't know that that's gonna play for Xbox, because I think it becomes a really tough value proposition very quickly at this price point. Because for me, like, a big part of the value was like, I wanted to try this indie game, and like the same amount of money I'd spend buying that indie game, I can try it for half that on Game Pass, and if I like it, I'll finish it in a quick amount of time, and I saved money. And if I don't, then I don't. But like,
presumably they'll still be there, right? It's the bigger titles that seem to be going up.
No. That's the thing, though. I'm not even talking about the like not having access to them. I'm talking about the value not being there anymore. Because again, like
for $15, you think is too much,
or
for
even
the standard tier?
Yeah, because I mean, again, if the game costs $15, why not just buy the game then? It's like
that's where I'm at. I mean, I've not subscribed to Game Pass for a while. I cancelled after I finished Starfield, and I've not really had a reason to resubscribe. I've just been like, I'll just kind of continue with buying games as and when I want them, and it's been working well for me. I agree with you. I think the most ridiculous move here is just how confusing the messaging is.
Yeah.
The fact that it's like a limited library of games where you've not really explained what games are there, what games aren't. Are they coming after a certain period of time? Because if it was like you're getting, everyone on Xbox Game Pass Ultimate gets access to a game 6 months before everyone on Game Pass Standard, you'd be like, okay, I understand that. I understand what this is about. But Starfield's in the list. Why is that tiered off?
Because it has DLC coming out. And so it's like conveniently it's.
But wouldn't you want that then on the standard tier? Because they make you pay for the DLC anyway.
That's a good point. I don't know. Yeah, I guess that's a good point.
You could put that on the standard tier.
I mean, it probably speaks to them feeling like the game has not generated enough revenue.
Which it definitely has not.
Definitely
has not.
For 10 years of development.
That game's not made it over the fence to PlayStation.
I'm sure it will.
Really surprised. Yeah, I think it probably will at some point.
I wouldn't be surprised if that happens once the DLC's out and they do like a Game of the Year edition kind of thing where it's like the ultimate edition that has all the content and everything. And like, we know they had a PS5 version in active development, so wouldn't be surprising.
I mean, really, they should at this point. I think maybe we're missing a piece of the strategy. Like, maybe the handheld is the piece that we're not seeing. Maybe there's something else. Maybe they see the Game Pass Ultimate because it includes the streaming aspect, and now they're flogging those Amazon Fire Sticks with a controller. Maybe that's what they're thinking. Like, well, you don't need to pay $600, $700 for a console now. You can just buy one of these sticks and plug into your TV and just pay us $20 a month for the rest of your life.
Yeah, maybe. To me, this decision reeks of pressure from the top down. That there is like that the last year or two, right, has kind of shaken the belief and the faith in Game Pass as like the future of Xbox, and like that this is where we're going, because clearly, right, like software sales have been down. We know that the Xbox is selling fairly well, but I mean, it's still number 3. It's like, I can't imagine that, regardless of how much Game Pass is making, that they're happy with how much they've invested to still be number 3 and still feel like they are perpetually losing a race that they've spent billions of dollars to be in. And, I think that if you're a Phil Spencer, right? And I think like Phil Spencer has made a lot of decisions in the last year or two that we have questioned pretty heavily. He's, paid a lot of lip service to things like maintaining quality and not laying people off, and then those things have happened. Like, he's a corporate mouthpiece. I don't want to mince words about that, right? And I do believe that as somebody that has a foot in video games, that like he does genuinely care about the longevity of Xbox and his legacy as the person that set Xbox up to survive, for generations to come. And I think that that's a mentality that clashes with being a board member or an investor in a company, because the kind of fiduciary responsibility, right, that Xbox has to those people is to make money in the short term and to make a return on their investment and, increase their wealth, not to really bolster the strength of the brand of Xbox, right? Like, that's the problem with like, and I know I'm on my anti-capitalist soapbox right now, and I promise I'll wind down in a second here, but like, that's the truth, right? Is that like, that is how business works now in the West, right? When you have these publicly traded companies that like what your the fiduciary responsibility you have as an executive is to make money, not to invest in IP, not to protect jobs, not to make great art, right? It's to, how do I make Xbox as profitable in the short term as I can? And all of the decisions he's made have been 4D chess, long game. We're not going to make money now. We're going to spend billions now so we can make trillions later. And I am getting the impression that like they're sick of waiting, and they're sick of spending money and sitting on their hands waiting for a return on all this investment. Because like, they have had a pretty good increase in software sales because of the acquisition of ABK, which is great.
Well, and also selling on PlayStation. Sea of Thieves was the number 1 bestseller for a good period of time over there. And I think that only came from above. I think that was Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, saying, "Why have we spent, over $100 billion or whatever on these companies, and we're not seeing anything?"
Yeah, to have these exclusive games that still don't sell consoles.
Because it was Starfield. That was the kind of basket they put all their eggs in, and it just did not perform. It did not come out with the kind of slam dunk that it needed to. And it went out with a fizzle.
Yeah. And I am inclined to think that this model in general is something that I just don't know. I don't know. Like, with the state of the economy right now and inflation and everybody like feeling the squeeze on their wallet a little bit more, I don't know that people have $20 to throw away on Game Pass when you could spend even $70 on a new game and just play it for a few months and own it, or
I think people do like subscription models, and no one's bought music in decades at this point.
But that's an affordability thing. Like, I don't think that has to do with people not wanting to, like, I don't think that decision happened because people were like, I don't want to own music. I think it was that it is such an insanely simple, cheap value proposition to pay one price to own access to every piece of music that you could conceivably want to listen to, rather than buying albums a la carte every month, right? Like, that makes sense why people do that. I think you're getting to a point where that value prop is not as clear, because if I play one game on Game Pass a month, if that game costs $20, I'm no longer saving money. And if you're an adult who has less time to play games, and let's be real, those are the people that can afford a service that's $20 a month, are they finishing these games? And how many people that played Starfield on Game Pass finished it in 3 months versus 5 or 6, right? And that's not a good deal anymore. You lost money on that deal. And that was always, at least in my mind, and maybe other people feel a different way, because ultimately that's what streaming offers, is its convenience, its access. Great, but like, is that more convenient then? Is that better access? Is that a better deal? If I have to spend this $20 a month to have access, I still have to pay for DLC, I still have to, it's like, I don't know that I see that, right? Because like, I'm looking at myself now. If I had just bought Starfield when it came out instead of playing it on Game Pass, I could go play it when the DLC comes out, but now I can't. And what, I'm going to buy that game that's over a year old for the same amount I would have spent on it? Like, I spent more to play that game, all said and done, if I ever play it again. And that...
Yeah, but you also might play Indiana Jones. Yeah, you also might play Forza Motorsport.
Yeah, I might, but it's like, that's a big might, And it's like, I think if you're somebody like, I could see... with like your habits, right? Like, you're definitely more the type of person to be like, I want to like play the first 10% of like several games and then decide which one I like and go on with it, right?
Yeah.
But like,
I like that, but I do think that maybe there's an angle where why don't you just do what PlayStation's doing, which is those like game demos where I can play a game for like 2 hours and find out if it's for me, and then decide, actually, I do want to pay $70 for this, and I'm going to just continue with it. But
even so, I think that, like, you've brought this up too, right? Where there was a point not that long ago, right? A couple of years ago when we would talk about, what streaming services we had, where we both had like a dozen, right? And it's like, you canceled all of them because it got to be too much money and you weren't using them.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. I now just subscribe to one kind of at a time. The only one I've never canceled is YouTube Premium. And that's it. I keep that forever. But like, I switch between paying for Netflix and paying for ITVX in the UK or whatever else it may be. And I've done the same with Game Pass. I've canceled it on and off. Whereas I used to keep it subscribed forever because it was 10 quid.
Right. And that's I think my entire point is that, like, people do like streaming services. Like, it's clearly a model that works, but I think it only works when the value is extremely clear and it outweighs more traditional forms of ownership. And I think gamers are more resistant to that than anybody else. Like, video games are like the last medium where there's like a really significant percentage of players that really care about having a physical copy and owning their games. Like that, we've seen that erode in, you brought up music, books, like, television and film. Like, people used to have DVD and Blu-ray collections until they didn't, right? And I think that when you start adding up all these little things that make this a less good value, yeah, I really do wonder what this is going to look like and if this is going to cause like a max exodus from these kinds of, streaming platforms, because the value just isn't what it used to be. And it's like, why spend, what's 20 times 12? You're a math guy.
240.
Yeah, you're going to spend $240 a year on Game Pass, or are you going to buy 4 games?
And it also doesn't take into account that we are different kind of players as well, because we have every console. We play also on PC. So it's like, we may want to pay $70 and go play Astro Bot, and then we may want to play Indiana Jones. Are you going to keep the subscription running while you're playing a game on another platform and you're completely not turning your Xbox on?
Exactly. And like, and again, if we're getting into numbers and statistics, how many gamers are there that the only place they play is Xbox? Not that many, right? Like, in the grand scheme of things, right? They're number 3. And I would imagine that a not insignificant percentage of the people that own an Xbox do own another console, right? They have a gaming PC or a PlayStation or a Nintendo. And that's,
Nintendo. Are you a boomer?
I am a boomer. I heard it as soon as it came out of my mouth, and I really hoped you were going to just let me drive by that one, but I deserve that. I deserve that, Raz. I'm saying that, Steve, because the Nintendo Switch 2 is on the horizon, so clearly there's going to be a new Nintendo platform competing for your attention. But you know what I mean? Like, I think that there's a greater number of gamers, like hardcore gamers anyway, right, that do own multiple consoles and that have those competing interests. And if you're depending on that type of gamer to carry Game Pass, I don't think $20 a month is it. I think that immediately becomes I'll just buy it then.
Which is no problem for them, to be honest. They're still making revenue that way.
Well, unless I go buy it on PlayStation. I mean, they're still making the money, I guess, right?
Them, so yeah,
yeah, you're right.
Either way, they're making money off it.
Let me ask you this. This is like tinfoil hat hours. I just thought of this. Do you think that's part of the thought process? Like if we Game Pass is too good a deal, so everybody plays there, we push a certain percentage off, they'll go start buying games and software sales will improve.
Possibly. I mean, I do think the software sales will improve, but they've always claimed that they don't look at those metrics. But
which is obviously a lie. Yeah, I'm sorry. Like that to me is like one of those. Like a couple weeks ago when everyone was like, remember like 100 days ago when Phil said that Indiana Jones wasn't going to come to PlayStation and now it's coming to PlayStation? It's like, he
said, to be fair to Phil, he said he wasn't in the first
at that time. I know. Yeah. I defended the language too, but we all know how that reads, right? We all know that is, oh my God, I forget who said it. I think it was Andrew Valentine in the Discord. It was after the Xbox layoffs news or I think it was Andrew. And it was like, he was like, "This it's a bad look on them that they just keep like loving to wear out," And it's like, I think that reeks of that to me, right? Of like, okay, yeah, like, I think we knew, like you and I, right, knew that that's what they meant when they said that.
They were trialing it as well. I do think that was just, bro, it was like, if these 4 games work, then this is the strategy moving forward.
But again, it's like, bro, like, there was a way to say that where it looks less like you lied a year later, and I mean, it is what it is, right? We knew that this was going to happen. I'm deeply unsurprised by that news, but it does, again, it reeks of this kind of like lack of confidence in the strategy, this backtracking, this we're just throwing shit at the wall because nothing's working. And just a few years ago, it really seemed like they were smartly setting up dominoes to have this, very calculated future. And it's like, not to say that, that they're screwed or anything. They are their parent company is the most successful company in the world. They got a lot of money to burn. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, I feel like this feels like another L for them from my point of view, right? Based on, what I think was the Trojan horse promise of Game Pass. I feel like they're quickly eroding that and creating a marketing problem where you used to just have this very simple, like, it's the best value prop in gaming, right? That's it.
I really think a large part of it comes from, there was always 2 tiers of Game Pass. It was Game Pass and Game Pass Ultimate, and Ultimate always had a few more games. It's that Xbox Game Pass core, the rebrand of Xbox Live Gold, and getting rid of Xbox Live and just calling it Game Pass Core to gain access to online services. That's where the confusions come from. I think if you had Game Pass Standard and it was like, well, we're going to put some games that are exclusive to Game Pass Ultimate, and you can have a look at the library and see what they are, and you can make that decision if you want to plump up $5 more a month. And I think that's a reasonable thing. But going with Game Pass across the board as the branding, I don't think makes sense.
And I think I want to be clear. I don't think that this is unreasonable. I think it's just a decision that will probably not bear fruit the way they want it to. That's my read on it, is that, like, I think this makes Game Pass less attractive, and I think that it being cheap and attractive was its selling point. So if that isn't the case anymore, then what is the extremely specific situation? This was a thing I said about the PlayStation tiers, right? When it came out, where it was like, what's your read on this? I remember you asked me, and I was like, look, I think this is one of those things where if I only played on PlayStation and I didn't have access to Game Pass, and I, wanted to have this option to, like, taste a bunch of games, it's not a terrible value. It's just not sexy, right? And that system has made money. We've talked about how it was profitable, and regardless of the fact that it was tough to market and yada, yada, yada.
Yeah, in the same way that Netflix pushing all the kind of password sharers off.
It
the
was
platform.
unpopular, but it helped
was
them
profitable.
financially.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. My thought is that with Game Pass, I am far less convinced that this will be a good move because there is inherently a smaller pool of people to monetize on Xbox than there is on PlayStation. PlayStation can afford to have a subpar service that's good enough because there is a large percentage of people that play all their games on PlayStation. And, what is it? Half? A third?
We have no clue because they don't share the data.
Exactly. And that's not even accounting for number of consoles sold. I'm saying how many of those people are Xbox only. And I think that number is a lot smaller. And
yeah, I do. That's probably in the low tens.
Yeah. And who knows? Maybe this is a situation like that where them creating this higher price point and focusing on whales will be enough that you get a certain tier of player that has money to burn and doesn't give a fuck about $20 a month, and that's going to be enough to cover the gap of the people that you lose. Maybe that's the case, but I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it could be that the Call of Duty is a big enough pool for them, or Diablo is a big enough pool, or having the games day one is a big enough pool. I feel like most people that wanted Game Pass and online were already subscribed to Game Pass Ultimate anyway, and they were kind of on that plan.
Yeah.
And Game Pass Standard came in as a way to combine that and give it to you slightly cheaper. They just got rid of Game Pass Console, which was the better deal. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. I still think there's a kind of piece of the puzzle that we're missing that they're not speaking about, that we've not seen, and maybe that is their next console. Who knows?
Maybe so. Well, I think this is one that I'm interested to kind of see where it goes from here. But I definitely have my doubts that this is the right path forward for them. But, remains to be seen, I suppose. So we're going to jump on the PlayStation side of the fence in just a second here and talk about the PlayStation 5 Pro. But before we do that, let me remind you that this episode of the FlipScreen Games podcast is brought to you by our Patreon producers for the month of September. They are, of course, Arnold J. Rimmer, Christopher Valenz, Gabriel Hasselmeyer, a.k.a. Sobe, Steve Stompy, Susan Likes Cats and also Boobies, Voodoo Vic, Ty the Dude, and Waka Hula. Thank you all so much for your support over on patreon.com/FlipScreenGames. You all the realest of the real, and we greatly appreciate your support of this and all of our sister shows, which are the Nintendo Noise Podcast and the Steam Deck Podcast. If you want to go check out us talking about what's going on in the world of handheld and PC gaming, you should go check those out. They're a great time, and if you like this show, you'll like those too. I guarantee it. That's all I got. That's good. Yeah, thanks for being here. Go listen to some stuff. I'm a little rusty. It's been a week or two. I think I said all the things. FlipScreen.games, that's the website. Go over there, get involved.
Sounded good to me.
I love you. Follow your dreams. I believe in you. Anything else?
No, I think that's about it.
Be nice. Spread positivity and kindness.
Vote Kamala.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Great. Good episode. Let's talk about PlayStation. So, in the weekend change that we missed, that we were off, that I was gone, times a flat circle, PlayStation 5 Pro gets announced. I'm interested in talking about this one. You and I haven't really gotten a chance to talk about it. And, there was a lot of conversation in the Discord this week. A lot of people, dunking on it, really, right? Like a lot of people kind of critiquing the price point, right? Because here's what we know. PS5 Pro, obviously, it's a Pro model. It's more powerful. Same CPU, but it does have quite a few bells and whistles that improves its overall performance. Has a price point of $800 US. It is disk driveless. If you want to buy a disk drive, it's an extra $100. And then
don't forget the stand. That's
and then I'll say the stand is also an additional cost. So I believe your final price of admission for everything is $850 if I'm not mistaken, because it's $700 for the base unit and an additional $100 for the disk drive. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, that's right. So about $850, which is pretty radical price increase, right? $350 more than the base PS5, and a lot of conversation online about kind of what the hell are they thinking? This reeks of, the PlayStation 3 price point where it's just like, this is just too much. It's, it's especially right now when people don't have a lot of money to spend. And, we talked a lot about how that even developers are kind of like, I don't know, we need a PS5 Pro. We're only just unlocking the potential of the base PS5. Like, it just felt like not the right time for this kind of announcement, let alone for it to them come out at this very expensive price point, right?
I also felt like in the video rolled Mark Cerny out again with his ASMR tones to show us the footage. What a dreadful way to showcase it in a shitty live stream where the fidelity of the footage is so poor we can't even see the difference between the two pictures, and we've got to wait a week for them to release some like lossless assets which come to us through The Verge and Digital Foundry and other outlets. The only outlet that got exclusive access to this pre-release was CNET. Who the fuck's read CNET in the last decade? Like, it honestly was a bizarre launch. And I think for me, it's the price point. I knew it was going to be $699. I think we discussed it before that it was always going to be $700. And then I didn't expect it to then be $700 plus the extra $100 for the disk drive. I think everyone in Europe is kind of reeling a little bit of how expensive it is over here, because it's like you do the exchange rate from 850 USD to GBP, that's 645 pounds. Even if you add then on the sales tax, like the extra 20%, that only gets you up to $699. That's the price it costs in the UK, $699. We then have to pay the extra $100 for the disk drive, and then the $50 for the stand. So, and in Europe, it's even worse. It's 799 euros. It's an insane price.
So it's like $950 to get the full package?
Yeah. Afterwards. So almost $1,000.
It's crazy.
By the time you're finished.
Yeah.
And that's before you bought a single game.
Right. Nuts. What I was and we can talk more about the economics of it and everything in a minute. But I was interested to see, and I'm sorry, I don't have their name in front of me. If you could pull it up for us, which member of Digital Foundry was the one tweeting about it. But it was
John Linneman.
John Linneman, thank you, and he was talking about Final Fantasy VII Rebirth and was saying like, oh whoa, like this is a night and day difference, and it's really making me like, I wanted to play that game originally, but I really didn't like the image quality on the PS5, and now I'm like dying to get back to it. I've seen some people doing graphical comparisons with games where it's like, here it is on PS5, here it is on PS5 Pro, here it is on like a high quality PC, and it does seem pretty competitive with some of those benchmarks. So with that context, I guess, does that change anything for you? Does it still feel like it's like an insane product?
For me, I think if I'm going down paying £850 for something, I'm paying the other $250 that's going to cost me to build a decent PC.
So so real quick, I have a bone to pick with that argument, because I don't like inherently disagree with you. I don't think I'm not sitting here.
I'm on about for me. Like, there are exclusive games, it's a console, and everyone's going to make a judgment call. I think, though, that they aren't going to see the uptake on the PS5 Pro that they did with the PS4 Pro.
I do very much agree with that. I think the PS4 Pro is at a way more competitive price point, and it came at a time where the PS4 felt like it was showing a little bit of age, and that's not been the problem with this one.
I don't know about you. I feel like we've not seen a game yet that's been like, oh, next generation is here, right? I don't feel like the PS5 and the Xbox Series X really lived up to their promise. We got promised 120 frames per second at 4K with ray tracing, and we've never got it. There's 8K printed on my PlayStation 5 box, and it's never happened. It's never gonna happen. No one's got an 8K TV. I don't know why that logo even got put on the box. It's bizarre to me.
Marketing.
It really just felt like that console overpromised, and now we're at a point where PlayStation's got really nothing for me to say, oh, that game didn't look as good as it could have and how I wanted it to play, that makes me go, I want to pony up another £850 to buy one.
No, I mean, I generally agree with that. I think the only thing that I've found weird is how much there's been the talking point of like, why wouldn't you just build a PC? And like, I just don't think that makes much sense, because the reality is that to buy a PC that competes with this on a graphical level, it would be more than this costs.
Yeah, it would be more than this costs. And then there's the fact that you've got to build it, and you've just gone through that process, and it's arduous and annoying.
Like labor is not free, and also like if you're not already a PC gamer, right? And if you're not already a PC gamer, like, do you have a monitor? Because if not, you're gonna have to buy a nice expensive monitor and a mouse and a keyboard, and it's like,
I mean, you
that
could
shit
plug it
adds
into
up.
your TV like Max does. So he plugs his PC straight into there, but that's again another annoying experience. It's not designed for it. I think for most people, most gamers, they want a console. I think at the moment, I'm yet to see a compelling reason why the PS5 Pro needs to exist and even exist. And I think that Xbox actually may have proven to have taken the right decision here, just to skip the mid-gen refresh.
I agree. Because I feel like even if I didn't own a PlayStation 5 and I was like in the market for like an expense, it's like, I don't know. Here's the thing. Seeing, someone from Digital Foundry like be like, oh, whoa, like this difference is actually pretty significant, like does make me feel like maybe some of the criticisms that the royal we were levying at it are not fair, right? That like that the price point is more appropriate for what it's offering. But at the same breath, it's like, I wouldn't, if I'm in that situation, I don't know that I'm shelling out an additional $300 for like a marginal increase.
Yeah, I don't think I am. My eyes are not good enough to notice that the image is slightly softer from 10 feet across the room, and they're just not. And I know that. And I've not once, like I said, have experienced on really any console other than the Switch thought, oh, this could look better. This could be like, this could be better. On my Xbox and on my PlayStation, I usually play on performance mode, which is exactly, apparently, according to Mark Cerny, what most PlayStation 5 players do. They prioritize frame rate over graphics. And this
shocking.
Yeah, and like this potentially can get us a little bit more graphical fidelity at the same frame rates. But maybe we're wrong. Who knows? Maybe everyone's going to jump at the chance. And maybe if you've already got the new model of the PS5 with the detachable disk drive, and you're looking to upgrade, you can take your disk drive from that one, put it on the new one.
That's true. I guess the thing for me is like, I'm the person who took flack on this podcast and will still argue with people that the PlayStation Portal was a product that made sense for certain people, and that like you can make products that make sense for certain people, and that's not inherently bad. But I don't know. Like I'm kind of with you where like I feel like it's too expensive to be the type of like impulse purchase upgrade that I feel like the PS4 Pro was for me, at least. And I know other people who bought it, like friend of the show Ken, right? Like he bought a PS4 Pro in the same way, where it was like, sure, like I could stand for an upgrade. Like, let me trade in my base. I'll get a God of War limited edition PS4, and yeah, like why not, right? Whereas like, bro, I'm not spending the entire cost of a Nintendo Switch and a game to upgrade a console that I already like. That I also, it's like, again, like to your point, I played 2 games on it this year.
And is Astrobot really going to look that much better on the PS5 Pro?
I mean, it looks great on the base PS5.
Exactly.
So it's like, I just don't, it's like, and that's the thing, right? It's like if I was that much of a graphics guy, I'd own a PC. And that's where
if you were that much of a graphics guy, you'd then also be playing every game on quality mode. And at that point, you'd be like, oh, I really want that extra frame rate because I always play on quality mode.
And then you'd get a PC.
Yeah.
If you really care. But again, it's like, I don't know. I do think that there's an argument to be made there of like the whole like, at $800, why not just build a PC? It's like, well, the real answer is that to get really, really great performant PC parts, it would be more than twice as much money, right? Like, to be transparent with you, dear listener, I just built a very high-end rig that I am very excited to play games at 4K 120, but like, it cost over $2,000, right? Like, to get it and have a monitor that can actually take advantage of it and all of those other things. And like, yeah, there are gamers that exist where they're not going to have to spend that much. They have other parts that they can invest in. And once you get into owning a rig and you modularly update it, like yeah, there are ways to offset cost. There's ways where it's not a one-to-one comparison, but like you double the cost of the PS5. $1,600 is still $1,000 less than you'd spend to get a high-end rig.
Unless you're using that PC for other things, like in our case, right? We use it
I use it for work
and editing videos and doing other things. So it's like that becomes a general purpose machine that also then plays games.
Right, exactly. And if I was not using it as a general purpose machine, if it was just for video games, I probably could have spent less money. But but my point there is that not to like relitigate that argument. It's more like, in the same way that I made the argument that, like, the PlayStation Portal exists for a very specific gamer, right? And the whole, like, why wouldn't you just get a Steam Deck? And it's like, the answer is that it costs 3 times as much money. That's a legitimate thing, right? Like, there is something to be said for middle-tier items, right? Like, you don't want, like, look at how many people buy 60-inch 4K TVs that are not very good TVs. Right? Because they don't...
It's just about the size.
They don't care. Exactly. And, like, I do think that there is probably a subsection of gamers out there that are not PC people that don't want to spend time and money building a PC but do want the best performance they can get on console, and that they're willing to shell out a few hundred more dollars.
I feel like...
How many people is that, though?
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like this came at the wrong time. They should have had an impressive title to go with it. This would have been great alongside.
That, too, is baffling, that this thing came out and there's not... It's like Astrobot is the game that is out right now. It's like...
Why is it not, Spider-Man last year? Why is it not Wolverine? Why is it not something like that?
Yeah, save it for next year, right? When Wolverine is ready. Or save it when the next, like, big PS5... exclusive is ready. And not to say that Astrobot is not a big exclusive. It is. But Astrobot would have looked just as good probably on a PS4.
Yeah.
Well, parts of it. There are parts of it that do have... there is one moment I won't spoil for you that I experienced in the second world where I was like, oh, this is next gen. Like, this is... there's a lot happening right now. And there's a lot of particles that are all moving in individual way, like that kind of stuff.
I'm excited to try. I'm gonna hopefully pick it up this weekend.
But again, that's not a fidelity thing.
No,
right?
It's not. That's a GPU side. That's not on the CPU side. So it's interesting that's where the kind of performance gains have gone here, thanks to PSSR.
Well, we've talked about that. Like, that was one of I thought the big attractions of this generation was I wasn't looking at the graphical updates. It was more having more processing.
You can do more things.
Having more characters on a screen at a time. Having more NPCs in a town, right? Like, having more... leaves falling, right? Stuff like not having the frame rate explode, like stuff like that. And it's like, I think it has delivered on most of those things. Those are the things I care about. So it's like, yeah, I'm not sitting here.
I definitely cared about ray tracing when they announced these. Everyone was buzzing about it, and I feel like
I don't give a fuck about ray tracing.
All forgotten about it. I don't really care about it anymore.
It is. I think that's my hottest take. Is and I'm sure there's an episode where I'm like, yeah, ray tracing's cool. Like, I'm sure it exists, but I think ray tracing is one of the fucking dumbest buzzwords that we ever bought in this goddamn industry of ray trace. It's yeah, it's really cool when it works, but almost no games can do it. And it's not worth playing the game at 30 FPS so that the sun tracks better. I'm sorry, it's not.
No,
I don't fucking need to see Spider-Man's reflection in every window I go by when I'm playing Spider-Man. It's just not that important. It's not worth it. And it's when we were talking about these games and their $250 million budgets, cut that fucking mode. How much money did we save? How many more fucking stupid features can you put on a goddamn I want a contractor list. I want an itemized list of where this money went, and I'm gonna be all right, slash that. I don't think we need a single graphics mode, right? We just learned that 70% of people play in performance. What the fuck are we doing, PlayStation? It's
No, I agree with you. I really feel though this just reeks of we had this planned, it was too far along, we couldn't cancel it in the exact same way the PSVR 2 did, and it's just
why not just sit on it though? Though, like you said, why not sit on it for another year and have a game alongside it, have something? But I guess it is one of those things.
But in 2025, is it then too close to the next gen at 2027, 2028.
Or does inflation get worse and you have to charge even more money for it? Because
I mean,
that's the crazy thing too, is to be like, hey, I know that we have raised the price of this device in almost every region in the world now. I think maybe everyone now.
no, you didn't get a price hike. America still didn't. Japan had its second price hike.
Yeah, okay, but that's an inflation thing. Like, let's be fair, right? Like, the yen is in free fall right now, and like we didn't get a price hike because, like, you know, the American dollar has been more stable than the yen or even the euro and the pound right now. And I'm not saying that means that, you know, I'm not trying to discount that experience.
I look at the current exchange rate, though, and every single market that costs more than the US market, when you add tax on, we end up getting shafted. You know, you look at it in euros, 850 USD in euros is 764 euros, and they're paying like $1,000, you know, in their money.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong, I'm not advocating for that. I'm not saying that makes sense. I'm saying that there's a reason Japan had one again, right? And it's because if you do the exchange rate, they were selling them for a very small amount of money by every other country's standards.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, that's their home market, really. And it just, it feels like they screwed up the pricing big time when they announced it. I mean, maybe obviously they couldn't predict the pandemic. They couldn't predict record inflation. They couldn't predict any of those things, but it was never a good look to raise the price. I feel so sorry for anyone that invested in a PSVR 2 because you got shafted. They're never going to release another game for that thing. And now the PS5 Pro just feels like it's a product that's here without a purpose.
And I think they're doing some real tarnishing of the brand. You know?
Yeah, I mean, the stuff with Concord's just ridiculous as well.
Yeah, it's like when you look at the last year, right? Like, it's like, and you know, I've advocated for cooler heads, right? Like, you and Max have definitely been more like, yeah, like PlayStation's having a bad year, and it's like, I don't think it's that simple, right? Helldivers was a big success. Astrobot is the highest rated game of the year right now. It's not like it's been all doom and gloom. And
yeah, if you can look at it in isolation when you unrelease a game.
They unreleased a game the same week that they spent 8 years of development on. They put out a controversial accessory, right? They put out a failure of a VR headset, and now they put out an overpriced Pro unit that feels tone deaf, right? And I think that all that paints this very easy picture of them being like, you know, greedy bad guy Sony, and that's like already a thing that gets levied at them more often than, you know, than the other guys, and or at least right now, at least in this,
they're the ones that charge for every single game upgrade, and you know, it's that always felt like nickel and diamond as well.
Exactly, and it's like one of those things where it's like, I think the PlayStation brand is so strong that it, you know, little chinks in the armor like this really never seem to matter, because ultimately, you know, PlayStation makes a good product, and they have people. There are many, many gamers that when they think AAA gaming, they think PlayStation, and that's hard to erode. And it's not impossible to erode. You can only do so many of these things where people are like, "What the fuck are you doing?" before you start shaking confidence. And
because
I don't think this is it, but like,
the next time I see them announce a game and I'm interested in it, it's going to be like, well, is it a 4v4 hero shooter? Am I actually interested in it? Is it what I want PlayStation to be making, which is third-person story-driven action games that they should be making and should have continued to make?
I will say, because I know we're going to do a whole episode about Astrobot probably next week, I would say. So if you're playing Astrobot, if you have questions, write in. I know Steve's going to start it up next week. I should be done with it by then. Hopefully Max will get to start it too. That game coming out and fucking crushing ass the same week that Concord imploded, I like, hopefully is a perfect case study for the current like new leadership at PlayStation, right? Of like, okay, so in the 8 years it took us to make Concord, a game that lost money and was on the market for like a week, we could have made checks notes 4 Astrobots. Right? It was like 60 people made that game in 2 years. Like,
it's mental, isn't it? It really is mental.
And it's a budget title. Right? It's not $70.
In the UK, it's £55 at the moment.
I think it's 60 over here, yeah. So it's like, I mean, like,
Make more of those. I seriously, that's that.
Make
I really
one of
feel
those
like,
a year, not Astrobot, but a game like that, right? Like a niche game in a genre that, is
where's
three.
the other Ratchet and Clank? Give us another one of those.
Why didn't we get a Rivet and Kit, right? Like
Yeah. Well,
the real answer there is probably that Insomniac does not have the resources to make 3 games at a time.
Well, and they were also led down the garden path into live service games. With
Right.
The Spider-Verse thing.
But even that, right? Like, that's true. But even with that, they had 2 other full AAA games in development simultaneously. Yeah. They were making Spider-Man 2 and Wolverine and maybe Venom, right? Like, all at the same time. It's like, whoa, that's a lot. That's a lot going on. Well, I guess Venom was probably not being made at the same time. If anything, that's probably being made now. Either way. Yeah. I don't know.
Who knows what they're doing? They managed
Make
to crank
one.
out a lot of titles, yeah.
Yeah, but I'm with you.
So, wrapping up, you're not going to get one?
No, definitely not. There's no reason for it. And like, if there was like a very clear like upgrade path, or like if there was the promise of like some really cool collector's edition or something, like maybe. It's like I didn't plan on buying the PS4 Pro and I ended up getting it, but I think that had a lot to do with the time of that game console coming out and it being at the right point in that console's life cycle, me feeling like I wouldn't mind a little bit more power, and having a collector's edition console connected to a game I was very excited about with a character that I really love. This has none of those things going for it. So it's like, yeah, I'm good.
Yeah, I'm exactly the same as you. There's no real reason for me to kind of jump here. If they showed me, say, a new Naughty Dog title that I was really amped about that ran twice the frame rate that it can on PS5 normal, then maybe. But I'm yet to see anything. Who knows? I was kind of hoping we get a price cut on the PS5 when the PS5 Pro got announced, but that's proven not to be the case. We got the opposite with the price hike. So I really don't know. I really don't know what the purpose of that console is at the moment. But I'm sure it's for someone, and I'm sure people will buy it.
I think you're right about that, but it just feels like such the wrong time for it. Like, I think even this exact same product just marketed in a different economic environment would hit so... It would feel less like offensive to people, and that's the thing I think is so tough here, is that the PS4 Pro had people being like, who is this for? But I thought the answer was a lot clearer. Whereas this, it's like, I don't like a very, very, very specific type of gamer. And that's fine when it's a $200 accessory. I think that's a little bit tougher to swallow when it's an $850 console. But I guess we shall see, Steve. Great work today, buddy. This was a fun one.
Yeah, it was good.
Good to be back. Nice to get to talk about both sides of the console war and how they're both just absolutely teeing up Nintendo for another incredibly successful launch, right? So we will see how this plays out over the next couple weeks and months here, but you're going to want to keep it tuned because no matter what happens, we'll be here to walk through it with you. So remember, folks, FlipScreen.games, that's the website. Like, share, subscribe to the show. Check out Nintendo Noise and the Steam Deck podcast. However you choose to get involved in the community or show your support to the show, we thank you oh so much for tuning in to another episode of the FlipScreen Games podcast. For the crew, I've been Pete, he's been Lucas, he's been Steve. We'll see you next week. Lucas is my cat, audio listeners.